ages 70 to 104. Many of them are in nursing homes or immobile, so they won't be here today. But I do have a list of the mobile ones who we are expecting today. There are 25 children of survivors. The survivors are dead. Their children are their heirs. We have 25 in that category as of today. And 18 grandchildren. All the children are deceased. The Riot survivors are deceased. There's no one left except grandchildren and other relatives, maybe a cousin or something. So we have 18 in that category. Okay, now.
Ms. Gates, how many will you be talking to today?
Probably about 15, if they all come. We have a list of those who need transportation. I'm waiting on my volunteers to come to provide transportation. Probably no more than 15 if we get them out. Most of them, I set this day here for those who are mobile and those that can come out if we provide transportation. And didn't have too many callers. The majority want to be interviewed in their homes. So Kevin and I will go to the homes. We have a list of them. We know where they live. About a third of them are in nursing homes. So we're going to visit them in their nursing homes and interview them. But today we want to talk to those who are mobile and who can come out. And we do have 10 or 15 who said they would be here. We will be here all day and try to meet their transportation needs.
And they're all from Tulsa?
Those that we're interviewing today. I do have a list. Many of these children and grandchildren are out-of-towners. And if we don't get any money appropriated, we may have to do them over the telephone interview. But we do have a grant application into the Rockefeller Foundation. And if that comes through, then there would be funds for travel. And I would travel and interview them in person. Dr. Ellsworth would interview those out on the West Coast. The commissioners would do that if we get the money. So,
why is it I haven't heard that children thing? I've got some kids.
I know, but right now you are the heir, and then when you go, then you take care of the children. Yes. I only did the children on here if the original person is deceased.
Okay.
Why won't Mr. Monroe adopt me?
Yeah. Your dad stays hidden most of the time. Where do you stay?
Running. That's why I don't see him. I'm running around. He's running around. So
yeah.
It's very rare that we see each other.
Right.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him in a long time. As long as I've ever been without seeing him. Yeah.
Me and you both.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Kevin, I'm ready to get this thing
Just one
rolling.
question, Kevin. Would Jennifer be in the way if she were to be in right here?
No, because I'm going to be pretty much tight.
Okay.
Which one to move?
No, you're fine.
I have my hat on, I believe.
Yeah, wait just
It's
a minute.
all right.
I had
It's all
something
right.
with some notes.
Well, it's good to meet you.
Got cards in my hand, been in my hand, but I'm not a softy. I'm a little bitty toughie.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah. Well, last time I weighed 124. I said, doggone, now that's too little.
Okay, we're ready to start.
Yeah. Okay, I'm ready.
Kevin, you can.
Go ahead.
I am Eddie Faye Gates, Chair of the Survivors Committee of the Oklahoma Legislative Commission to study the Tulsa Race Riot of 1921. This commission was the result of House Joint Resolution 1035 by Representative Don Ross in the House, and he was joined by some other representatives in the House and by Senator Maxine Horner in the Senate. This resolution created a commission. 11 members were appointed, 11 members to the commission. 3 of us were appointed by Tulsa Mayor Susan Savage from a list that was submitted to her of people who would qualify to serve on this commission. I was honored to be one of those chosen. The bill requires that one has to be a survivor of the riot. Our survivor is Joe Burns, who will be here later, and the other commission member from Tulsa, Dr. Vivian Clark. The others are from all over the state, from all regions, geographic regions of the state. Our consultants, our two major advisors, Dr. John Hope Franklin and Dr. Scott Ellsworth. And there are others who were appointed by the governor and others by the mayor to assist. The task of the commission was that we do certain things. Among the tasks assigned, we were to identify persons who were residents of this area. We were to get a more accurate death account, the actual deaths during the riot. We were to identify survivors of the riot and record their testimonies. We were to get a more accurate account of the property losses, insurance records, census records, where people lived, how their property was lost, what happened. We were to locate documents, missing documents, and preserve those documents, physical objects and so forth. And we've been fairly lucky. We advertised in the major print media, state, local, and nationally, and we got a lot of results from those. We also have a website through the Oklahoma Historical Society, and we have gotten a lot of information that way. One thing we have not been able to find is the Bulldog edition of the Tulsa Tribune, May 31st, 1921. We're still looking for that. Specific committees were set up to do specific things to deal with those issues we mentioned above. Dr. Scott Ellsworth and his subcommittee is in charge of locating the burial grounds and getting a more accurate death count. I am chair of the Survivors Committee, and that's what we're meeting here today, all day, April 16, 1999, at the Greenwood Cultural Center in the historic Greenwood District, where 35 blocks of prosperous black neighborhood was wiped out during this riot. An area so prosperous it was known as the Black Wall Street. So here we are today to interview those that we have identified as survivors. As a result of our media search, as a result of local people giving us information and us following through, we have located 51 actual living riot survivors, black. Now today we're dealing only with the black survivors. At another time we will interview white eyewitnesses and others, because their account is very important also. But today we are dealing with the black survivors who lived in this area, this historic area where we are today. And as a result of our research, we have located 51, ages 78 to 104. Many of them are immobile, and so they will not be here for this interview in the Greenwood area. We will have to go and interview them in their homes or in nursing homes. Some of them are out of town, and we will, if we're out of money, the original appropriation by the legislature, we're out of that, but we have submitted a grant application from the Rockefeller Foundation. If that comes through, we will have funds to travel and go and videotape these people in person. If not, we will have to do telephone interviews. But we have 51 living black riot survivors who lived in this Greenwood area, ages 78 to 104. We have another category of children of survivors, black survivors. The black survivors are dead, and their children survived them. We have 25 in that category. And then we have a third category where the survivors are dead, their children are dead. There's a category of grandchildren, cousins, other relatives. We have 18 in that category. So that is where we stand today. The results of our findings, we are required by the House Resolution 1035 to write our report, to submit the report to the governor, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the President Pro Tempore of the Senate, the Mayor, and each member of Tulsa City Council, not later than January 5th, 2000. So we're in the wrap-up. We're getting all of our final reports, materials together for the final report. And this is a very controversial clause of the report. The report may contain specific recommendations regarding whether or not reparations can or should be made, and the appropriate methods to achieve the recommendation made in the final report. So that is a little quick capsule of what the law is and what we're trying to do. So today, April 16th, 1999, the exact date, 2 years ago, is when the resolution was put on the governor's desk. So here we are today interviewing the black survivors. We're meeting that clause that we record the testimonies of the survivors. We have a legal form for them to sign, a legal release form, and this form says that I, the undersigned, hereby authorize and agree that my recorded testimony regarding the Tulsa race riot of 1921 is true and accurate to the best of my knowledge. I understand and agree that said recorded testimony is now the property of the Oklahoma Legislative Commission to study the Tulsa race riot of 1921, and that the recorded testimony and transcriptions may be used at the discretion of this organization for whatever scholarly, educational, artistic, or literary purposes may be determined. And the survivor will sign in two places, a signature and a typed or printed name. And I will sign as the interviewer. Signature, typed or printed name. This is legal. This meets the legal requirement for our testimony. In case there would ever be reparations, this would meet that legal requirement. We did not have to recreate the wheel in doing this Tulsa study because two other studies have been done in the nation. One was Rosewood, and you may have heard of the film Rosewood. A similar incident happened in Florida, much smaller scale than Tulsa. In fact, I gave a handout to the reporters, the media here today, and your handout tells you that Tulsa's race riot was much larger than Rosewood. There was another one in Wilmington, North Carolina, and the commission has all kind of archival material that has been given to us. So we have records of all of this, Rosewood, Wilmington, every single artifact about newspaper account of the Tulsa race riot is in the archives at Tuskegee University, Tuskegee, Alabama, my alma mater. And our commission has copies of all of that. So we have uncovered some excellent information about the riot. We have looked at records, we've looked at the insurance records, we've looked at claims filed. We know that the Black Wall Street was wiped out. We know that black entrepreneurs filed 1,404 insurance claims. We know that not one was ever paid, 0. And so we're looking into things like that. We know where the houses were. We've looked at records. We know where everyone lived at the time. In 1920, we knew where they lived. 1921 was the riot. 1922, those places no longer existed, so we can deduce they were destroyed in the riot. So we've done excellent research, but no research takes the place of eyewitness testimony. And that is why this day is so significant. And I'm so honored to be here to interview the riot survivors. Mr. George Monroe is going to be our first black survivor. And Mr. Monroe, thank you for coming once again to give us some testimony. We already have lots of testimony, as you have said earlier, that you've given to us. Today we want to concentrate on the day of the riot, May 31st, 1921, the day after June 1st, and June 2nd, when the National Guard did regain control of the city. So would you please tell us, and we already have on your form your name, your address, your birth date, or where you live, so we don't need that, but we need you to describe that day, the riot day. Please tell us about how that affected you and your family.
First, I must say a person must realize that I was age 5. I was 5 years old when this happened. There are some questions that people ask me that I just don't know about, being my age at 5 years old. They say that kerosene was dropped from an airplane to start fires. They ask me about that. I'll tell them I don't know at 5 years old. That didn't come to my attention. They asked me a lot of questions. I remember what I remember at 5 years old, and that's my story that I tell. there are some things that I never did tell because I thought that maybe they were not important. They were important to me. My neighbor, Mr. Johnson, had a daughter, Arvella, and during the riot, we held hands. We were at the same age. Arvella has passed away now, but we were in the riot holding hands together. They would ask me a lot of questions of where we went. The only thing I can remember that we were holding hands running down Easton Street. And I remember that, but that's not important to what they want to hear. But all in all, the thing that I remember more than anything is in our house, which was right next door to Mount Zion Baptist Church. My mother was with her family, 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. All of us were in the house, and I've told this story over and over again. When we saw coming up the walk in the front of the house off of Easton Street, 4 men with torches in their hands. These torches were burning. When my mother saw them coming, she says, "You get up under the bed, get up under the bed, get up under the bed." And all 4 of us got up under the bed. I was the last one, and my sister grabbed me and pulled me under there. And while I was under the bed, one of the guys coming past the bed stepped on my finger, and as I was about to scream, my sister put her hand over my mouth so I couldn't be heard. Now I remember that. They set our house on fire. They went right straight to the curtains and set the curtains on fire. And as a result, that's how our house first started to burning. Now, I've told that story over and over again. I remember that. It's other little things that I remember. That I remember seeing people getting shot. I haven't mentioned too much about that is because they would ask me who was it, where was it, and at 5 years old I wouldn't know, so I just kind of kept it to myself. And since this has been going on, trying to find out about the race riot, I've thought of a lot of smaller things that would not be important to people that were finding out about the race riot. At least I think they wouldn't be important. But all in all, that's my story about the race riot at 5 years old. Had I been older, I probably would have remembered more things than that.
Okay, let me say something. Thank you, Mr. Monroe, for that eyewitness account. There are some other things that you may not think important that are extremely important. One of them is what you've told me privately, and that is how the riot affected your father. Now, you do know, you've heard what he owned before the riot, you've heard what he owned after, you've told me how that affected his mental condition for the rest of his life, to lose that property, to lose his status in society, to never regain it. So you do have eyewitness account of that. Would you tell us a little bit about your dad's skating rink and what he did after the riot?
In my family, my dad was the head of the family. What he said went. My dad wasn't a joker or a person to say what he didn't mean. My dad was very strict, especially with me boys. And what he would say would go. Cut me off a minute.
Ready.
Our business was
Tell us
on-
about the loss of your business and how that affected you.
Well, it was up the street on Exeter
Tell us
Street.
about that.
Okay,
Okay.
well, all right. then.
Let's
Okay.
get the cameras rolling again.
My mind went off on
But that's
that.
extremely important, the losses to him as a person.
Oh, I see.
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'm ready again now.
Okay.
As a result of our house being on fire, we thought about our businesses a block away on Exeter Street, later named Haskell Street. We owned a skating rink there over a large piece of property that we had. And the skating rink, during the time of the race riot, was a large place as to where we worked. I remember that is because that I learned to skate at 5 years old. And I had a lot of fun being in the skating rink and helping my father handling the skate keys at 5 years old and skating and having fun. That was where we kids had fun then. Now, during the riot, it got burned down. Our home got burned down, and we had a little rent house next to our house at 410 Easton Street, which was our home address. And we lost all of this, our property, our home, which was right, and it went along with the burning of Mount Zion Baptist Church, with the destruction, I'll say, of Mount Zion Baptist Church. Our home went along with that, plus our businesses that we had on Exeter Street. And during the riot, everything was burning around us. And for years later, I mean, as many as 10 years later, there was a telephone post in front of our house that burned about 2/3 of the way down, and it's sat there. Nobody never did do it. You can see the burn marks on it, and it was about 6 foot tall then after it burned and fell over. And that post stayed there as a reminder for years and years and years. And I guess it was 20, 25 years after the race riot that they finally moved that post. It must have been around in the 40s when they moved it, but that post was right in front of, between my house, my father's house and Mr. Johnson next door. That post was out on the curb there. That's one thing that I never did mention before, but that post was there for a long time before they ever removed it.
Okay, what about your daddy? Did he never did rebuild a skating rink, you told me. What did he do after the riot?
After the riot, my father was a man of his word. He went to W.E. Wynn Lumber Company, which was located on Elgin, right across the tracks on Elgin, W.E. Wynn Lumber Company, and borrowed enough money from Mr. Wynn, or Mr. Wynn let him have the lumber that he needed on credit, and he built 5 little, what we call, described as shotgun houses. 3 rooms, one right behind the other one, with outside lavatory facilities on the outside. He built 5 of those where the skating rink was. He built, and they were facing Exeter Street. And we rented those out for years and years and years and years. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Monroe. I need you to sign this little form for me.
Sir, could I ask you one question?
Sure, sure. I was hoping that somebody'd kind of have something kind of get my mind concentrated.
Well,
Hey, y'all will be 80-something one of these days.
You don't know what it feel like, huh?
Yeah, and you know, it's okay. I'm gonna get this over with.
Okay.
You know, you're sitting here, and you're sitting there with a red light. He's sitting there. Boss is sitting there, and the nice little lady sitting here, and everything else. That puts pressure on you. You're trying to think. For when you was 5 years old. It's a heck of a thing sitting there, and you got to be.
You did a fine
And
job.
I know, but you see, I got to look at this again, and I've got to cut my own throat when I be looking. Why in the hell did I say that?
You did fine. That was good. Now, right here, your signature, just like you always write.
Just like I always
Yes.
write it. Okay.
You all have beautiful signatures. They stressed penmanship in those days. So your
Well, I don't know. I
penmanship is
sign.
beautiful.
Sometimes I sign it, and I wonder, did I sign it?
Oh, you have beautiful handwriting.
I know Mr. Monroe has a collection of
Now, this one printed.
dimes that was
Okay.
part of his father's monies from the skating rink that had melted together. So,
Oh, yes.
and he even got some of those pennies that were left every time somebody come to visit his house. He got a penny, and none of them
He
had
gave-
1921 or early on.
She
So.
gave me one of those burned pennies. I have one of the pennies.
I had about 3 rolls of those burned pennies, all Indian head. Not all of them were Indian head pennies. And I had about 3 rolls, and I just gave them out one at a time. I looked the other day, and I said, doggone, my pennies are short.
A penny short.
You gave me
The guys that was handling the machinery, the driver, the guy that's interviewing me. And I said to myself, well, hey, I just told him, I says, hey, the people that I get along with and everything else, here's a little, you know. I had a lot of fun with those pennies.
Mr. Monroe has another claim to fame. He was the first black Coca-Cola root salesman in Tulsa when Tulsa integrated. That some of his pictures on the wall over there, driving his little Coca-Cola van.
What was your route? You remember
The whole north side.
Whole north side.
Whole north side. They gave it to me and said, do what you can with it. Man, I went to the ball games, and anybody hit a home run, get a case of Coke.
Whoa.
You know? I mean, and these guys got out there, man, and fighting. I mean, and other little things. Man, I gave away that Coca-Cola, and O.R. Wiley, never will forget him and everything else. He was tricky, though. Mr. Wiley was tricky. I want you to come up to the office. I want to have an interview with you. Okay? All right. Now, before I came up there, he threw a couple pieces of paper right down in the middle of the floor. I never will forget this. And I walked in the door there, and I saw this piece of paper. I had to walk right past him, and he's sitting on a great big polished desk back there. So when I walked in, I just picked him up and everything else, took him and laid him on his desk. I mean, it was just like I see that right there. I mean, it was clean paper, you know, just, and I just picked it up and laid it on his desk and everything else. He says, I put those there on purpose, just to see what kind of guy that would come in here. And he said, and had guys coming in here interviewing and everything else, walked all over. But you picked them up and put them on the desk. You got the job. In other words, somebody could see something. You know? Well, and I never will forget that. As long as they live, I got hired. I got hired behind that. But boy, it used to be tough to go. You don't know how tough it used to be for you to get a job across Archer. You had to do something. But thing about it, I don't know. I've always made it all right. I'm born here. I got a fair reputation. I remember your dad, more or less, we just scuffled together. See, he knows me. Willie Collins knows me too.
Oh yeah?
Oh,
I'm killing all the tapes and running.
Tapes, got some tapes. But anyway, all of us came up together here in Tulsa, on this north side over here. It's how you carried yourself as to whether people remember you or not. It's how you
Didn't you say your dad worked as a janitor after it was over?
The Strand Theater between 1st and 2nd on Main Street. My dad worked there that's the only job that I ever knew my dad had. $14 a week. That's what he made. Took a broom, the seats were lined up like a theater, took a broom and sweep it from one aisle, then go around and sweep it to the other aisle, sweep it down to the front and pick it up and clean up that theater. Mrs. Hazel McCoy was the owner of that theater. And she thought the world of my dad. She gave him the keys to everything, you know. And he worked there as long as I can remember. That's the only job I've ever remembered. My dad was a custodian now.
That's right.
Yeah. You know,
But he said that
from a
his dad,
janitor to a custodian.
but his dad never got over losing his business and having his entrepreneurship. And,
That was my question, basically. How, as you grew up, did you talk a lot about that? Did you come up a lot at the dinner table or with your friends?
Never word, never said a thing. I had a dad, oh Lord, I said, oh, I just wish I had that much of what my dad had, but I lost it just like my sons are losing it now. I've got a son, 39 years old. Whew. Boy, sometimes I want to just wring his neck. Got it made, and yet you're just a tramp. You might, well, I guess it's hard for me to call my boy a tramp. Got a good mind on him. Just got it made. Why should he want to work and everything else? Well, Dad is in pretty good shape. I mean, I got a place to eat and a place to stay. So why should I do anything? Well, but that's neither here nor there. But all in all, Tulsa is a very unique little place. And this was my neighborhood up here. When they built all of this and everything else, Mount Zion Baptist Church is right there. See, I've always lived across the street from the Booker T. Washington High School. I have always lived there before they tore it down. We moved from one place to another. We moved from off of Easton Street on Elgin Place. Now, I was still right across the street from the school. I've lived across the street from the school all my life until I got grown here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I've always lived. I knew every teacher, what time they came to work, and everything else. But Tulsa's home to me. It's home. I mean, I know green the dirt from the year, especially this area here. I came up in this area here before all of this was built. This was my area. Down on Greenwood at the time, my dad used to, you stay off of Greenwood, you learn too much stuff down there. You stay off of Greenwood. Every time he turned it back, he'd be down there trying to find out what the hustlers was doing, who was selling corn, whiskey, and we were in on the know of everything. My dad, he knew I was in that man. He turned out like my son.
Well, you know, as North Tulsa is going through a change right now, how do you see North Tulsa Day compared to North Tulsa of yesterday? with the growth or?
It's one thing that I'm disappointed in, and I'm part of it. People, it's not enough people going for what you're doing here. You've got to do something to get the average person. Of course, you've got to stick money in there somewhere. You've got to stick money because, hey, those lights, you got to pay for those, or gas, you got to pay for those. You have to pay for your salary. You've got to pay these people to run this place and everything. But what we need is more or less the average person. Hey, a man that's a bellhop, a man that's digging a ditch for a living and everything. You've got to have something down here for him to be a part of. Now, when I say a part of, I don't mean your pocket full of money. Something that he can do, and his being here means something. You've got to touch that man that doesn't have that white-collar job or doesn't have that money in the bank. Because it's still over here on this side of town. There's a lot of people over here on this side of town if they're not on welfare. I'm not kicking us now, but there's a lot of people over here that's not doing it. They need to be next to something down here. You know, I don't know if they just hadn't grabbed me up and stuck me down here on a kind of a race ride or something. I don't know as to whether I would ever on my own come down here to, maybe June the 19th, maybe I would be out there somewhere and everything else. But it's here, you know. And I said this all before a mixed audience here too. It's just true. You've got to do something to get the average person. The man doesn't have $20, $30 in his pocket to spend. Yeah. And
Okay, media people, I might also tell you there's a lot of interest in this. I think Kevin touched upon that. Kevin, we might get this on ground. There has been a lot of attention given to this Tulsa Race Riot Commission. Actually, there's a lot of attention all over the nation to heal racism. That's why the president had his initiative, and Dr. John Hope Franklin, a Tulsan who has connections to this Greenwood area, was chair of that. Because we want to get over all of that and get on with life. That too long that's been divisive and it's been hidden and covered up. So this is an attempt to just face it, get it out in the open. You can't ever redo history. You know, I'm a history major. You can't undo history, but what you can do is learn lessons from it so you don't repeat the mistakes of the past. And that's what we hope this Riot Commission will do. We're uncovering the long-range, deep simmering things that led to the riot, you know, economic problems, political and social exclusion, racism. The Klan was just rampant at that time. Even in the Klan's members were in the local government, even in the state government. So we need to look at what leads to this kind of aberration in society and heal it once and for all. And that's what we're so proud of this commission. That's what we're finding. There's not any animosity. The commission works beautifully together. It's an interracial commission. It represents all the geographic areas of Oklahoma. And we're committed. We're just fit together like a puzzle. And we're committed to finding this information and using it. We're going to write our report. We're going to write a book. OU has said they will publish it. We're going. They have set up a writing committee, published articles on that, and I'm honored to be one on the writing committee. And we hope these findings will help us to finally heal this incident in history. We didn't forget it. You don't forget the past. You just put it under a rug, but it's there and it's festering. We're hoping this commission, these findings, will cause us to finally deal with this, acknowledge what happened, not assume responsibility and blame. This commission is not about that. We're not here to say, this group, you're to blame and you have to do this. We're here to say, this was the mindset at that time. These were some of the events that occurred at that time. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm sorry it happened. You know, you don't have to take personal responsibility for it. But you can say, I'm sorry an event like this happened in our city. And you can say, we hope it will never happen again. We hope that we will have healing. And that's kind of a trend all over the world. Look what's happened in South Africa. Who would have thought they would have repentance movements and have an integrated government? If they can do it there, we can heal our thing here in Tulsa. And that's what this commission is all about. And it is gaining national attention. Every day we get hits on the website from all over the U.S. The major media, New York Times, Chicago. I had an interview last week, an hour interview with the Chicago Tribune reporter. Had an interview last week with a Fortune 500 magazine reporter from New York City. People magazine is coming to do a story on us. 60 Minutes has called and wants to come to our June 1st meeting and do a story on us. I got a press release from the London Telegraph. They just did a story on us. And so it's just fascinating to know that there is so much interest in this topic. Not that you want to place blame, or not that you want to condemn, or, you know, just face the issue and move on. And so that's what we hope this commission is doing.
I have been getting the credit for knowing about the race riot at 5 years old. And to come to think about it, I would like to put the credit of my being here in the right places. They asked me about my father, and I tried to describe him as he was. But there's always one thing that my father has always said, and I remember it today. Every one of my children, I want them to have a college education. My oldest sister finished from Langston. My next sister finished from Hampton Institute. My brother finished from Xavier College. And I finished from Wiley University. So at least he got his wishes acted upon, and I want to give the credit to him for thinking as he thought of his 4 children.
And you are? Okay, this is Eddie Faye Gates, Chair of the Survivors Committee, the Oklahoma Legislative Commission to study the Tulsa Race Riot of 1921. Our second interview today, April 16th, 1999, is with Mrs. Iola Streeter Jackson. And Mrs. Jackson, we've talked before, and I've got some background information on you. I've got some background information on you, where you were born. You lived on Iroquois, and you were a riot survivor. You were here. Now, we have lots of information we've uncovered about this Tulsa race riot. Today, we want to interview actual survivors, black witnesses. At another time, we will be interviewing white eyewitnesses, others with relevant information. But today, we want to hear from the actual black survivors who lived in this area known as Black Wall Street at the time of the riot. We're especially interested in what you were doing that particular day, May 31st, 1921, when the riot started, June 1st, when the riot accelerated to its worst day, and June 2nd, when the guards came in and gained control. We also want to know what effect that had on you. Did you lose property? Did you lose any members of your family? Did you have to move? How did that single event in history affect your life? So would you just tell us that?
Well, I'd like for you to know that during the time of the race riot, I was just a child.
We know that. Yes, ma'am.
And both of us. My mother took me around to the neighbor's house until we got ready to leave. But it's not too much I can tell you about.
Well, we just interviewed a man who was only 5 during the riot, but he still has some vivid memories, and he still told us about what property they lost, how that affected his dad the rest of his life. So if you could just tell us, do you remember what you were doing during when the riot happened at your house, and then you had to leave? Where did you go, and how long did you stay there, and those kind of things? How old were you at the time of the riot?
About, I don't know, about
When were you born?
1907.
Okay, so 7 from 20. Well, you were 14 then. So you were a pretty good sized girl.
Yes, I was.
So just tell us what you were doing that day and where you went, those kind of things. At your house, where you lived, what you were doing the day of the riot.
When they let us know there was a race riot going on, my mother took us to a lady's house and stayed there until we got ready to leave. To tell you, I was just a child. I don't know.
Who was the lady you went to stay with? Do you remember who that was? Was it a relative or?
No, it was just a woman that we knew. She stayed. To tell you the truth, I would like to tell you all the truth things, because there's a lot of things I just don't know about.
Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
I can't remember now.
Yes, ma'am.
I was there during it the whole time.
Did your house burn? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, your house burned. You went, when you left where you were hiding out and went back to your house, it was all burned down. Is that right?
We didn't leave our house too very much. And when it got burned down, they took us over to the relatives' houses and around. Not too much I can tell you about that. I just know I was a young
Yes,
kid
ma'am.
girl.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am,
So tell them what you did.
that's right. Just tell us because you were there.
Yeah.
See, I'm the history major, and I dug through books and found this, and it fascinates me, but I was not there. So your account is important, even if you think it isn't. Just the fact that you are a living witness to it is important.
Oh, yes, I really
Yes, ma'am.
believe it.
Yes, ma'am. Were you afraid? I know as a child, were
Well,
you
I
really?
was really afraid.
You were afraid? Yes, ma'am. You thought you were going to die?
Yes, I did. I thought that for the time being.
Did you lose any
But,
relatives?
No, I didn't lose any relatives. But some of them, like my sister, one got hurt during that race.
How did she get hurt?
I don't know, to tell you the truth, I don't know how she got hurt, but I know she got hurt before she came back there. And I was just the youngest, I was the youngest child of the family.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
of course, I was just going where the others would take me. And I was awfully afraid for the time being until my mother come and got us. We all went to a certain place, home where some of her relatives is. But there's not very much I can tell you about it.
Well, just what you've told is very helpful because it's someone who was there and you felt it.
Oh, yes, I felt it.
After it was over, did you all rebuild your house or where did you live after the riot?
My mother, where we lived at, we came back to the same house. It wasn't burned down. But we was in a pretty tough place at the time. And they had to come get us out, my sister and myself. And of course my brother was young. But that's not too much I can
So
tell
you did,
about it.
after the riot, you went to live with relatives, is that what you said?
Yes, we went to live with relatives until we got to a place of our own.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm,
Did your parents talk about the riot afterwards? Did they talk about
They
it?
did, but Lord, there's nothing I can tell you about the riot, other than I know I'm afraid. they carried us from one place to the other until we got home. We were on the good state.
Did you see any of the troops that were taking the men to these detention centers? Did you see any of that, or any of the soldiers, or anything like that?
No more than my own brother. I had two grown brothers.
Oh, yeah, two grown.
Yeah, I had one named Tom and one named Harry.
And after the riot, all of you all got back together and you were safe.
Mm-hmm. We all got together.
Well,
They was around there for a while, but they got together with my mother and told her where they lived. And we got a place to stay. But there's not very much I can tell you.
well, that's all
I
right.
don't
You're
know.
helping just being here. Just being here is a help to us. So we're grateful that you're here. Did your brothers serve in World War I? Were they old enough to have been? Oh, they served in World War I?
Yes, sir.
Were they overseas in France, or where did they serve?
Harry, I don't know whether Joe went overseas or not, but Harry did.
Oh, Harry Streeter?
Yeah, Harry Streeter.
And he was a World War I veteran? I understand.
I think it seemed like to me, I don't know whether my brother Joe was the youngest brother, Joe Streeter.
I understand a lot of the black men had served in World War I and had come back and had freedom, a taste of freedom, and they liked it over there, and they came back and they were not content to live with segregation.
Well, that must have been my brother Harry, Harry Streeter.
And so he was a World War I
And
veteran.
my brother Joe was the youngest boy in
Yes.
the family, but he did go. And the rest of my other brother was too old.
Well, Mrs. Street, I thank you, Mrs. Jackson, I thank you so much for coming.
I'm sorry, I can't
No, you
tell
did
too
fine.
much
You
about
did
it.
fine. Okay, Kevin Ross wants to ask you a question too.
Before the riot, what school did you go to?
Booker Washington.
Oh, really? And what do you remember about Booker T. Washington during the riot or after the riot? Was it destroyed in the riot, or what is your? Was the school destroyed during the riot, or?
No, it was not destroyed.
Oh, so it survived the riot.
Yeah.
And
I went to Booker Washington. I thought I was going to Booker Washington after the riot, so it wasn't destroyed.
That's right.
oh, so what year did you graduate from the school?
I don't know.
She was born, let's see, I've got that right there. Yeah, 1907, so she probably,
25. 26.
yeah, that's how we do it.
Can you recall?
That was when Oklahoma became a state.
1907. Oh, okay.
Yes, it was 1907.
What was one of your most fondest teachers at Booker T. Washington, if you can remember? Is there a teacher that you liked the best at Booker T. Washington?
Yes, there's some of them there that I like the best, but I can't call their names now.
What about, how was E.W. Woods? He was the first principal of Booker T. Washington, E.W. Woods?
Oh, yeah, he was good. I remember him.
So he was a pretty good principal, 35 years?
Yes, he was. He was good.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Mrs. Jackson.
I didn't have
No,
much to
it was
share.
more help than you think. It was. Okay, let us have you go.
Remember a little bit.
Yes, she did. And just to have her here and have her on tape was helpful.
But I know I was here.
That's what we want to know. Race rights survivor number 3, Verenice Dunn-Simms. Mrs. Simms was a 17-year-old student at Booker T. Washington the day that the riot broke out. She says they were preparing for their junior-senior prom, and she has many vivid memories of this riot and where she was, how it affected her, how it affected people around, good Samaritans, good white Samaritans who befriended them. She is just a walking history book, and it's a delight to interview a Riot survivor with a memory as sharp and alert as hers, and with specific eyewitness details. Mrs. Simms. Okay, go on and tell her. Tell them about the ride, what you were doing, and all the things you've been telling us.
Oh, as I say, there wasn't so much I could tell, but one thing. Up on the Standpipe Hill, they were shooting from there, and where our home was located on Kenosha in the 800 block. We were out in the backyard. My father came and had us to come in because the bullets were falling out in the backyard. Fellow friend of his, a white man named Sandy McMullen, came over to our home and got the family and took them out to his house. He's lived way out on the outskirts of town. I guess that would be, I imagine, somewhere in the vicinity where the new Booker T. Washington School is now, back in that vicinity. And we stayed there until after this was all over with. When we came back, nothing but the ground. Home burned down, everything, nothing left.
And you told me about Booker T. Washington School. Tell me where it was located and how it was used as a center.
Booker T. Washington School at that time was on Eastern Street. I don't know, it was between Greenwood and whatever that street is going back, Detroit, I think it was. And they took the injured men, that's what you want me to do?
Yes, ma'am.
They took the injured men there, made it, in fact, set up a place just like a hospital. And there we cared for the injured. Volunteer help went in to help the doctors and whatever they had to do, you know, like helping them with the bathing and the medications and things of that concern. And the place was, I couldn't say just how many men, but it was full. They had set up in two sections. One section was, I guess you would call that the, let's see, this side would be the east side, yeah. It was the east section they had to set up, and then they had to set up on the west section. And just cots, it wasn't beds, it was just those army cots. That's what the men were laying on. And it was any number of them brought in there for where they'd been shot and things like that or beat.
Now you were a young girl and you volunteered. What kind of things did you do?
And help.
What, you bathe them and help with the medication?
Well, they wouldn't let us bathe
Oh.
them. You know?
Well, what did you do? What did you do?
We'll give them water,
Oh.
get their clothes and take into them, help them with their feeding, things like that. But no, we didn't.
Okay.
We didn't do that because the doctors and the nurses done that. Well, see, the girls, they wouldn't let us do that.
Oh, I see. Did some of them die? Did they take them to the morgues, or what did you do?
Well, they would take them out another direction so we wouldn't see them.
Oh.
They would have us to go back, you know, in one section of this place where they had set up, and they would take the dead out another way. So we couldn't tell how many went out to that was dead. But some did survive, you know that. Because some were shot in the arms and they had legs and bombed up and things of that concern.
Tell me about after the riot. Did you, your house you said was burned to the ground.
It was burned to the ground.
But how did you all rebuild, or what did you do after the riot?
Well, after the riot, they gave everyone tents, you know, to live in. That's what they were supposed to have to live in. My father took one, and he built a floor, you know, got wood and made a floor in ours because he said he wouldn't have us on the ground. But by coming up near, you know, he knew that that was my finishing year for school. And we just stayed there until time in August. And in August, we left and went to Oklahoma City, where I went to finish my high school education. That was at Douglas High School. So we didn't spend the winter in the hot, because some of them, it was hard, I imagine, in those tents. But my father was determined that we would not live in a tent, you know, no winter. So we went over there and he got a house and we lived in that house until he came back over here the year that I finished school in 22, he came back over here. He built our home, and he had, you may know Mr. Rollison.
Oh, yes, yes.
Well, he was a carpenter, you know, at that time. And he helped him, and he built our home. And then when I finished school, I went on to Langston University. And my father moved the family back here. So when I came out of there, I came on back home to the family. We came back to the family home.
Now let's get back to that riot. I just can't imagine what it feels like to have bullets dropping around.
It's scary.
Tell me about that.
Well, when bullets fall around, you don't know whether to run, whether to lay down, whether to sit, or what. You just standing there this way.
And your dad was real concerned for you. Oh.
Well, it was pathetic.
Yes.
When you out in the yard and bullets, but they were coming from Standby Hill. That's where they were coming from.
And of course, you all never got any insurance money, anything on your lost property. That's what we found in our riot study.
They didn't give you nothing.
That's what we
You
found.
just burned out, that's all.
Have you, have you all ever forgotten the riot, or will it always be a memory?
No, the riot, it's only in my family. It's only two of us living now. My sister, who lives in Springfield, Missouri, and myself. And you'll never forget that riot. That's something to be always in your remembrance. People were killed, and you go in and see the people mangled. And then some people you never heard of anymore. You don't know where they were killed, where they just left town, because Mr. Berry at that time, he had one, he had the bus line. They called it the jitney. And he had one bus, we called it Old Blue. It was the blue bus, big bus. And my uncle had built, this bus. And the man that drove that bus, he filled it with people and took them to Muskogee.
Oh.
All they could cram on there. They say when the bus was pulling out, people were just
Trying to take them to safety away from the
trying to
riot.
get on in safety. But
Yes.
he took all that he could pile into that bus to Muskogee, Oklahoma, to get them out of the riot.
Thank you. Mrs. Dunn, thank you so much for this interview, and we hope this commission can help to bring healing and can help to find some answers. You touched upon a very real point, and that is not knowing what happened to your relatives. Now, you do know, some of them know that their relatives died and where they're buried, but there's so many that do not know, never heard again.
Never heard any more from them.
And it's so
People
important,
just left.
yeah, and it's important to have this kind of closure. We were talking earlier about the Holocaust and the Jewish people, how they needed to have closure, and how they have established some kind of memorials in their camps so that they can have closure. We hope that at this riot commission we can come up with some kind of accurate account of how many were dead, who died, where they're buried, so that we can bring closure to this. And we thank you for sharing this with us.
Well, I thank you.
Can I ask a question? Over at OSU Tulsa, which is the former grounds of the Booker T. Washington School, a proposal has been submitted to put a historical marker for the old school. Could you share with me that night of you guys were getting ready to for your prom? Or that night?
What, the night of the prom?
Uh-huh.
Well, the night of the prom, of course, the hall was all decorated and everything, for the dance. But the night of the prom, this Stratford Hotel was on the corner of Eastern and Greenwood. That was right in where there was a whole lot of bad shooting going on and stuff. And that was all canceled. And that hotel, was torn down. They just demolished it. So when the riot was over, it wasn't nothing down here on Greenwood. The hotel was all blowed up and everything. It wasn't anything down there.
So the prom was evidently canceled.
The prom had to be canceled. wasn't nobody going.
Yeah. So E.L. Goodwin, the founder of the Oklahoma Eagle, was one of your classmates then, right?
Huh?
E.L. Ed Goodwin?
Well, Ed was a half a grade behind me. See, I finished in 22.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, Ed finished in 21.
21 years. That's right. Right. He and his sister?
Yeah, Ed was the Hollingsworth, the Coma Taylor, all of that was in, that was their finishing year. Mhm.
Thanks for sharing.
She brought out an interesting point about the Stratford Hotel. That was one of the most
Oh, that
expensive
was-
pieces of property
And it was beautiful.
that we've
It
heard.
was beautiful.
And Stratford had to leave. He had to flee Tulsa and was charged with being a fugitive, and he was a lawyer. And that haunted him the rest of his life to be on the run. It was not until about 1997, about 2 years ago, that Stratford's name was clear, that Representative Ross and the Greenwood Cultural Center had a very big program, and Stratford's relatives came in, his grandchildren, one of them had been a UN ambassador, and they were lawyers and prominent people in Chicago. And his name was finally cleared. And still, they've not ever been paid a cent for those losses, and that will be one of the issues that this commission will be considering.
And I think to date that the Stratford Hotel still to date was the only black-owned hotel in the United States.
Probably. So thank you so much. This was fascinating.
And thank you.
Can I ask you, how did your family make their living before the riot, and was that disrupted after? What did your father do for a living, for example?
Well, after the riot.
Before,
Okay,
yeah.
can you move over here and let us have Mr. Booker sit here?
You
So we
mean
can stay on schedule.
after the riot?
Or before the riot and after?
Let him
Yeah,
sit here.
yes, ma'am. So we can stay on schedule. We've got here.
Can I help you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right.
Oh, yours was one of the best. Riot survivor number 4 interviewed, Mr. Kenney Booker. Mr. Booker, we've been taking testimony today of actual eyewitnesses to the Tulsa race riot. I'm a historian, have studied this, know a lot about it from the written point of view, but nothing takes the place of oral history, those who've heard it, smelled it, felt it, lived it. So would you share with us something about that riot? We want to know what you were doing, where you lived, what you were doing that day, May 31st, 1921, when the riot started, how it affected you when it went on into June 1st, and finally June 2nd when it was over. Tell us about that riot and how it affected you and your family.
Okay, I was 8 years old when the riot started. At the time, I don't recall what we were doing at the very outset of the riot, but while they were shooting, there were bullets. My father had us to hide in the attic.
Mm-hmm.
And while we were up there, the bullets were raining on our roof, either from an airplane or from Standpipe Hill we were shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And finally they came to martial law was declared, or they had help, soldiers coming around. And they came to ask my father, they used a provocative, unacceptable word, N-word,
Mm-hmm.
you have a gun? Now, he probably did have a gun, but I don't think he was shooting. He said, I don't have a gun. But he said, well, please don't set my house on fire. Well, he knew that we were up in the attic, so as soon as he left, they set our house on fire. We were up in the attic, 4 children, 5 kids, baby boy, my sister, and 3 brothers. And we were able to get out without an injury, but bullets were singing around. They were stopping as they were going along. They were stopping the riot. But when we got down, the telephone poles were burned and falling, and my poor sister, who was 2 years younger than I am, Kenney, is the world on fire? I said, I don't think so, but we in deep trouble. So we kept on, and they carried us to Convention Hall. I believe that's where they took us. Didn't know what happened to my father at the time, but when we got down there were quite a few people. And then my father happened to be working for a millionaire oil man, H.F. Wilcox. And they were letting people go if white people would vouch for him, say they would take care of him a while. So he took us to his home. We lived in this basement and stayed there for a while. Later they had moved into a tent. And my father put a floor in it. My brother was studying, he was 14 at the time, electric wire, so he wired, we had lights in our tent, so it was very, did have some kind of
Entrepreneurial spirit. That's wonderful. I know from my study that no claims were ever paid, that you didn't get anything for your losses. What how did your dad rebuild? Did you all get another home? Where did you
Oh,
live?
yeah, we lived in about the same place. I don't know if Mr. Wilcox let me have money or what, but we rebuilt it. At the time, we were one of the few people that had a new car. We had a Ford when it first came out.
Oh.
Because he worked for this millionaire, and he had a fortune. But the new car burned up and everything. We made a model. We got a Ford, another Ford later. And I don't know how he got the money. I imagine Mr. Wilcox let him have the money because everything was burned up.
Well, I thank you for sharing that with us. Has that riot, how do you feel about Tulsa facing its riot history? Do you think we're doing the right thing?
I think so.
Trying to get the information?
Yeah, at the time, like I told this Dallas News, he asked me how I feel about white people. At that time, I hated all whites. Hated them, but I learned that, I had to learn that all of them didn't cause this riot, and especially a person like Mr. Wilcox took my family and took care of us and everything. Well, everybody is not like that, so, but lots of people see one member of a race, they conclude that everybody's like them, and I learned a long time ago that's not true.
We thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Okay.
Okay, Kevin, you do.
Came back married after 50 years. They walked out of town and came back. They didn't lose. I don't remember losing any friends. Not told.
Race Riot interview number 5, April 16, 1999, Mr. Elwood Lett. Mr. Lett, I'm Eddie Faye Gates, chair of the Survivors Committee of the Oklahoma Legislative Commission to study the Tulsa Race Riot of 1921. And we have talked to you before informally, but today we want to get you on videotape, and we have your legal release form, and we're carrying out one of the tasks assigned to us by the Riot Commission. We're gathering information today from eyewitnesses to the race riot, and I understand you are one. The history, the documents, all of that is important, and I'm a historian, I've studied this, and we gather valuable information. But nothing takes the place of oral history, the eyewitness accounts of those who saw the history being made, who felt it, who smelled it, who touched it. So that is why we're so grateful to you for coming today to share with us. And I understand you have lots of interesting things to share, that you even lost your grandfather in the riot. We know that some people lost property, some lost relatives, and we know that you lost your grandfather. So that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. First of all, let's get a little background information. Kevin, you want to turn this off while I get that? Tell me your birth month, Mr.
12/16/16.
12/16/1916. And where were you born? Here in Tulsa?
Copperfield, Kansas.
Oh, Porterfield. And where did you live at the time of the riot, your address?
It was right back up here called Fairview.
Fairview?
Yes.
And it was actually on Greenwood then? Or?
Yes, right off of Greenwood.
Right off Greenwood. And did you own your home? Did your dad own his home at that time? Or
No.
did you live with your grandfather?
My mother and my father, my grandfather, and another sister.
Okay. And did they own the home or rent it?
They were renting the
Okay,
house.
you rented. And did that house burn and your
Yes.
possessions?
Yes, all the possessions,
Oh.
practically.
Okay. Okay. Now you can turn it back on. Now, Mr. Lett, I want you to tell me everything you can remember. I know you were young, but young people have vivid memories, especially something traumatic like this. And I've heard you talk before about what that riot meant to you and how afraid you were. And then I want you to tell me about that riot, May 31st, 1921, what you all were doing, how your folks reacted, where you went. And then I want you to tell me about today, how you feel the effects of that riot. What did it do to you? And how do you feel about this commission? Are we doing the right thing? So would you just tell us about that riot when it happened?
Well, now the right has, at that time, I was rather young to really know what emotional background it would have with me. Because being as young as I was, around about 5 or 6 years old, and hearing my grandfather and mother speak about it, come on the inside, come on inside. There's gunfire going on. Well, naturally, I didn't understand really what they were talking about gunfire until my grandpa said, come to hear your mama talking to you about coming on the inside. So anyway, I came on the inside. And as far as I can close my eyes and remember, after the gunfire, seemed like there was, I guess, been 4 or 5 white fellows that came to the house. And my mother and my baby sister and myself, we put us up under the bed. And told us to keep our mouths shut, don't say nothing. Well, naturally, me being wanting to say nosy, I still want to know what was going on. And Grandpa, boy, don't you hear your mom say, keep quiet. Anyway, after that, somehow he managed, I don't know where Grandpa got the wagon from, or the horses or whatever was going to pull us away from there. But I remember very, very clearly the white people, they went on because I thought they were going to do some harm to my grandfather there, but nevertheless, looking at him and he being an elderly man, which I was happy to know they didn't shoot him or kill him there at the house. They seemed to be pretty nice people by letting us get in the wagon and go on about our business. And I can remember which was, you're talking about a disturbing moment was when we got to the edge of what is it, Sperry up here. We hadn't got even through the town of Sperry before this white guy asked my grandfather, where in the hell are you going? Using the N-word. And my grandpa said, we're going out of town. And he said, not this day, you're not going out of town. Bam!
You saw your grandfather get shot?
I saw him get shot. Bam! And he just, my mother let out a scream, oh, you have killed my father, you killed him. And I thought he was going to do the same thing to my mother, but fortunately they didn't kill her or harm her. And from then on, I can't remember really how my mother managed to get us on through Sperry and Skytooth and got us as far as No Water. Because my father lived there. Of course, my mother and father had separated, but he had already gotten 2 children by her. And of course, what made it so nice with him and my mother, see, my father was white. So that made a big difference right then. because he used my mother as a mistress, what you call it. When you got a wife and already got a woman beside a mistress woman, well, that's what he would use my mother for, as his mistress, because they got 3 kids by my mother. And of course, they died in infancy, the kids, the babies did. And that's as far back as I can bring you up to date, and as far, it will always bring a scar to me. And I don't ever even speak of it, never even thought about speaking of this kind of happenings until I got with Don Ross and Maxine to speak on the subject as a route. I've been asked from time to time, what do I think about it? And I say, I just say this, in which maybe I shouldn't. I said, why should you dig up a barrel of worms so that crawl everywhere other than just let this here, let the dirty worms die and forget about what's done happening. But when I think about it, to speak on this about is a beneficiary to the young people of today, knowing that Tulsa has not always been what it is today. You've got so much to be thankful for that you're halfway there. You've got a long ways yet to go for it to be free, in which I don't think that will ever happen, to be just actually free to do things that the white man is doing today. I don't think will ever come to that agreement where you are welcome in the theaters and hotels and motels and all that. I just don't think that will ever come to that.
I thank you for sharing those really personal accounts from your past with us. It's been very, very helpful to me, and I think it's going to be helpful to this Riot Commission and to the city of Tulsa.
Well, I hope so.
It will be, because you have shared with us where we have come from, the thinking at that time, the hatreds, that riot, and I think we can learn lessons from history that we should not repeat those kind of things. And I think the fact that the black community was brave and rebuilt and went on with their lives, that should give courage and hope to our young people today, that no matter what kind of situations you face, you can overcome them.
Okay.
And so I think you have helped us a lot today, and I thank you so much for coming and sharing that with us.
Well, I gave you all of my information.
And it was wonderful.
The same thing that I have given to you. I'm struggling. There is a lady here that, her name is Mrs. Hampton. She has been telling Mr. Lacey and different ones about her being lost from her mother when she was a young girl, and the different streets like Pocahontas and stuff like that. I don't even remember nothing of those things like that. But she has a back history, a lot of information that they're trying to get with her.
Kevin, let me say a little bit. Mr. Lett, your story brought out some interesting things, and that is what the word is called miscegenation. Whites who had children by blacks at that time, even when they could not have legitimate marriages. That touches a point with me, because I have the same kind of history in my family. In fact, I will be going to Dallas, Texas this weekend at a book signing, And both sets of my ancestors come from Texas. On my mother's side, they came from Sulphur Springs, Texas, which is near Dallas. Many of my relatives live in South Dallas. Some of us we have one full African ancestor, and we have a plantation owner who was white as an ancestor. And like you said, the women were used as mistresses and bore children, so that's our heritage.
Yeah.
And on my father's side, the same thing. Waco, Texas, a little place called Marlin. They are descendants of my ancestors, descendants of the slave plantation owner and an African slave. I was going to ask you, you had any contact with your white relatives?
Yeah. Those that are alive, yeah.
Where, do they live in No Water?
They mostly all have all passed away. I had a cousin. He lived someplace out in California who called me about a week or so ago wanting to have a reunion of the Lett. But as far as I know, and I'm the only surviving Lett. Now those that want to come in and share something are offspring.
So you're the only surviving
I'm
one?
the surviving only of the Lett family that I know.
Yes.
But they tell me, well, you got cousins here and cousins here and cousins there. People I never heard of.
Yes. Well, we have articles in the Dallas paper when I'm going down to sign. We're asking, I'm trying to reunite with those relatives. So that's kind of interesting, and that's going on. In fact, the Jefferson family, the white Jefferson and the black Jeffersons have just recently reunited. There's another bestseller book was written by a young white man, whose father owned a plantation in Virginia, and they got together, the black side and the white side, and so that's facing our history. This really happened, and that was the mindset.
As far as white men having black women as their mistress, that's still going on as of today. Only it's just more wide openly now than it was back there then.
And even back then, sometimes it was the white woman who had children by black males, but it was most often the plantation owners and the black women. But anyway, we're facing our history. That's part of facing our history. And these families are coming together, having big reunions. And my maiden name is Pettit, so there are white Pettits in Texas and black Pettits. And one of the most prominent of the Pettit families was a reporter who lived in Los Angeles, Tom Pettit, who was a national newscaster. And he has since passed away. But it's kind of interesting to meet with these relatives and have these reunions and set our genealogy straight. And so Mr. Lett has given us some vital information, and we thank you.
She's doing what I have been asked to do.
Mr. Porterfield, just tell me about what you were talking about, where you lived at the time of the riot.
Well, I was born, like I was telling you, a few hundred yards from here. Frankfurt Place, 323. And during the riot, I remember leaving Tulsa in a buggy with Mr. and Mrs. Freeman and their son Ted Freeman. Mr. Freeman might be remembered after the riot. He used to drive the bus around here and they called him Daddy Freeman. And as I recall it, we went, I don't know if it was Mohawk Park or somewhere out that way. There were some soldiers and some tents. I think we stayed there maybe a day or two, and then when we came back to Old Booker Washington High School, and I distinctly remember that because they gave us some fish, and that made me awful sick. I remember that when I was just 3 years old, and so. And I was reunited with my mother and dad. And then right after that, my mother and I went to live in Muskogee while my daddy had the house rebuilt. And all I can remember about seeing is burn out, foundations and stuff like that. I don't remember my mother and dad, either one, ever telling me about anybody being dead that they knew of. to this day, I can't recall any funerals or anything that they ever recalled. And that's just about all I can remember about it. My dad, my stepdad, is Homer Mosby. He was a tailor. And my mother helped him. She did the sewing. And I spent most of my time with the Freeman who lived next door, and Teddy. He was kind of my babysitter. And I can't remember too many other people in the neighborhood, you know. If somebody would call their names, I could, you know.
Did they lose their tailor shop? It burned to the ground?
Yes.
And how did they rebuild? Do you know how they got money to? Because I know that there were no claims paid by insurance.
Well, my dad, I think one of the reasons he had money in a trunk.
Oh.
And for years, we used to chip silver $half and dollars and quarters and things to spend. My kids did, and I used to have a big 10 or 15 pound wad of silver that had been burned in the race route.
Oh, yeah.
And those kids of mine chipped that stuff off and spent it. I got about that much. I'll bring it to you sometime.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. So your folks had money and they used their own money to rebuild?
To rebuild, yes, as far as I can recall, yes. And we was fortunate, my mother and I, we had some friends. They had some friends we lived with in Muskogee. And for a time, I went to school in Muskogee. And then we finally came back here and they was gradually rebuilding Greenwood. My dad had a cleaning press shop on Cameron there.
And he didn't talk much about the riot, or
No.
he didn't have any bitterness or anything about it?
No, they never expressed
Just
anything to
didn't
me.
talk about it, huh? Well, I thank you for sharing that with us, and I'd like to see that melted lump of silver.
I will. I don't have much, but I'll bring it to you, and I'll bring you that newspaper.
Then you've got
It's
a
real
newspaper
old
for me.
newspaper.
Good, I appreciate that.
My wife's dad was editor or something,
Oh,
and I'll bring it to you.
thank you. And
Sure.
Kevin probably wants to ask some questions about Booker T. Washington.
Oh, definitely. I'm working with the, next door at the university where we plan to put up a historical marker for old Booker T. Washington. And what we're trying to do is get as many stories about life at Booker T, pictures if anybody got any, or yearbooks, and just what was it like going to a school such as Booker T?
Oh, it was great. The teachers were great, and students, and everybody had to learn.
Mm-hmm.
There was no failures, because if you did, well, you didn't pass like they do now. And we had some tough teachers. Why, they'd get on you. Everybody can recall Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Neal.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've heard that name.
Yes, it's a dark-skinned lady.
Oh no, she wasn't dark-skinned. She was a pretty hefty lady. Neal's jury.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. The one that she don't let. She made sure that the boys were gentlemen.
That's right.
And if she saw you doing something you ain't supposed to be doing outside of school grounds, she'll get you anyway.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, the teachers did, and they would tell you, you catch you smoking something, so boy, you tell your mother, caught you smoking. And if you didn't, you got a real good whipping.
Then you go home and get
And Mrs. Neal was left-handed.
Uh-oh.
And let's see, we had two left-handed teachers who could swat you pretty good. Oh, the football coach's sister, couldn't call her name. He coached under what's it called?
Seymour.
Oh, he coached under Seymour Williams.
Mm-hmm.
His sister, she taught there. Well, how come I can't call her name? Well, anyway, she could swat pretty good. She was left-handed too.
Mm-hmm.
They'd take you in the cloakroom and kind of work you out. Now, these guys that played football and basketball and that kind of stuff, you're talking about Mrs. Neal.
Mm-hmm.
If you got loud and boisterous outside her classroom, she'd call them in there and whale them too. Woo! And then she'd turn them over to Prof. See, you were in a lot of trouble when When he got old too, because he'd take a two before to you.
So Prof was
But
Woods?
Seymour.
Seymour, okay. Oh, yeah.
He was coach.
I don't know what it is about those left-handed, but my mother was left-handed,
Oh,
and
they
boy,
could-
she
I don't
could
know,
tear
they
you
come
up with
from a
that
different
left hand.
direction.
But I guess
Where did that come from?
Yes.
On the left? What is it?
First building I went, when I went to the top there, I went to Book Washington. That was a old wooden building. For years I had the
Oh.
picture. I'll try to dig up some. I'll tell you, you need to see about pictures, Verenice Browner. I'm sure you know Verenice. I thought you know Verenice. Well, she's in the phone, but Verenice Browner. Her husband was named Lemons Browner. He took a lot of pictures. He got a lot of pictures of Book Washington. Classmates and stuff like that. You get in touch with her, you could get a lot of, I mean, he got a lot of them. He had a lot of them.
Yeah.
Mine, the worms ate my pictures of them.
Oh.
I had them stored in a box.
Oh, no.
And they come up, you know, I looked at the box all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I finally looked in there, wasn't nothing.
Underneath, yeah.
Looked like
Oh,
stuff.
here's Mrs. Gibbs.
Yeah, I know, I came across a 1921 yearbook, which is kind of neat because it came out, I think, said about a week or two before the race riot hit. And
I didn't see that. Who has that?
it was at the school.
Oh, that school?
Mhm.
Okay.
And so one thing that I'm gonna be doing with that, you know, I already got some pictures of the race ride on film, but I'm gonna take some of the pictures from the yearbook and put that in there because, you know, everybody's talking about the race ride, but one thing we need to talk about is the resilience of Booker T. Washington.
Well, it bounced back, I'm telling you.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, I got stories where it was used as a health facility for the American Red Cross for the race riot victims. And,
Right, that's where we went.
yeah. And so, what did it look like on the inside?
Then I can barely remember. I can remember going upstairs, looking out over the streets there, seeing all those burned out structures.
So you saw all the tents. I wish I would have brought those pictures with me.
You can also, let me see, I'm trying to give you another name. George Monroe should have.
We just interviewed Mr.
Did he have some
Monroe.
pictures?
No.
Well, like me, probably.
Yeah, he told me I had to come over to his house. Go ahead.
I just, do I need to read it loud? Let's see, first I think I'd like to tell you where I live.
Okay, wait a minute.
I do this. Survivor interview number 7, Ernestine Gibbs. Mrs. Gibbs.
I'd like to first talk about where we lived at this particular time. Now, Tulsa was not very big at that time. And we lived on King Street. Now, that was about the end of North Tulsa at that time. See, we didn't go very far north at that time. And we lived over in, you would go east on King to the railroad track. And over in the railroad track, there were 2 blocks of houses. And that's where we lived. I had not heard, or we had not heard anything about what was going on down on Greenwood. See, even though we didn't live very far out, we still didn't hear very much. See, no radios and no TVs and not much visited around that. And then it was evening too, night. So I was studying my lesson for exam for the next day at Booker Washington High School when somebody banged on my door. My mother had gone to bed. My brother and my little cousin, they had all gone to bed. But I'm still up studying for my exam the next day. When this man bang, bang, he said, "Put out that light." Said, "You the only house that has a light burning." So we didn't know what they were talking about, you know. But then I did put the light out, and I did go to bed. We had a friend that was young, real young friend, that was working, and he lived in the hotel down on Greenwood. Wasn't in the bed long before he came banging on the door. He was scared because by that time I guess they were fighting down there on Greenwood. But he wouldn't come inside. He just took a little pallet to lie down outside. We still got back in bed. He just said what was going on, and we got back in bed. But at daybreak, we looked out to see, we were right on the railroad track, and here came all of the people from every direction coming down the track. And although my brother was only about 10, because the young man was afraid, and because people were running, he became afraid too. My brother did. So then my mother wanted to try to keep up with my brother, and so she just got just a little of anything we could get, and we just went out, got in with the people, and we were all going down the railroad track, going north on the railroad track. And of course, I think Golden Gate Park is still out there, but we don't do much about it. They were right at the end of, I believe, Golden Gate must have been about, what is it, about Pine and the railroad track. And that's where everybody was running. See, because we didn't know anything about North Tulsa, but we out north, nobody knew anything. We hadn't been going out there. So we ran on out there. We lost my brother and his friend. And what they did, they went on or ran. My mother had a sister lives in Sapulpa, and they said, my brother and the young man said they ran into groups of young men coming in, and the young man said that my brother, being a boy at 10, said his brother, he thinks they didn't bother him the way they would have had he been alone. But anyway, they swam the Arkansas River and went on to my mother's sister. But now, by the time we got to Golden Gate Park, of course, Mama just had 2 kids. Here's a young girl about 14, and then we had her little niece about 8. And people were just all just milling around out there. And they were being shot from up in the air. I've been reading about that, saying that they weren't, but they were. Of course, I know they might have been blanks or something because they didn't shoot anybody. But everybody was scared about that too. But there were some shots coming from up above. Then finally, we just decided to sit down, my mother and my cousin and I. And while Mama sat there, a young man came by, didn't even know us. And he looked at Mama and he said, "You might as well come on and follow me," he said. And so Mama decided to go on and follow him, and everybody was running to the highway. Now, I don't know what highway that was, because we'd gotten way out there, but it was some highway, and of course loads of cars were coming in, and we got word to be careful in trying to cross the track, the highway, because you might get shot. And so we were particular about that. But little by little, but we got across there. And now remember, this was way up in the early morning. So we got tired way after a while. We were just roaming around out in the woods out in North Tulsa. So we thought we would lie down just to rest for a while. And you could lie flat on your back, and you could see that smoke up in the air, even from
down on the ground, up through the trees and all. And see, as I said before, we didn't see any of the shooting and all that's going on, but we did do some of the running. Now, finally, a group came by, I guess it was about maybe 4 or 5, and there was maybe 1 or 2 men in that bunch. And there was a baby that was crying. And so one man said, we could see a house up there. So he said, I'm going up to that house to get this baby some water. And he said, whatever happens will just have to happen. So he walked up to get the baby the water. And in a few minutes he came right back, and a white man came back with him. See, and then we all, the group of us that were there, went on with this man. Then the fighting and all was over, and we went on with the white man to his home. And cars were coming out picking up people, so we were picked up. Some people went, they said, to the old convention hall, but we went to the fairground. That's where we went. And there, of course, they had hot dogs and food like that, you know, the cars set up like that. And by that time it was becoming close to the afternoon too. So they put down mattresses so we could lie down to sleep. And that night we slept in the fairground. And the next morning, this young man came out to my mother. I remember him coming up, and he had a gun. And he asked my mother, will you keep my gun while I go with them to help bury the dead? Well, you know, we didn't even, when he came back, didn't even ask him about that. We should have just asked him, but we didn't. But anyway, he went to bury the dead. So there were a group of people that were shot, I could tell. And I guess by noon or somewhere like that, maybe, they had houses and they had the cars. Did you want to go back to your house, to your home? So yes, we wanted to go on back home. I thought, now we're at the fairground. You know where the fairground is located. So when we came, you know, you're going to come right through Greenwood. When we came through Greenwood, there was not a building standing. There was not anything, and water was running, you know, water pipe was running and all of that. We walked, and we just looked and walked on Greenwood there while we stood there a little while, and I said, because being that age, see, about 14, but we're getting close to 15, because I was in 9th grade. I said, never, ever, ever come to Tulsa again. I thought as soon as I get out of that, the best thing, get going away from here. And so then we went on out to where we lived, out to King Street. And of course, all the way out, everything was burnt, you know, everything. Of course, now Verenice Church did have, not what it has now, but it had part of the building standing, but I don't remember what it was, but I knew it had a little bit there, but everything else, everywhere. And there were big hotels and homes, and most people lived right around in here, where we are now. That's where everybody lived nearly. So there wasn't anybody there hardly. So we went on out to King Street where we had lived. And when we got out there was not, even the tree was not a tree. The only thing that was on the ground anywhere around it was like parts of stove, you know, that wouldn't burn, something that couldn't burn. Now part of that would be there. So then we just came on back we did come back to Booker T. Washington School. It was, that's gone now, but it was there. And of course it was near the end of the school year. And I had something on exhibit. I don't know what it was in the sewing room, but I remember I got it off the wall. And we sat around in there. We just didn't have anything else to do, just sitting around. So, but I think around 4, something like that, the train started running. And now we didn't get to see the only part of Tulsa that we saw was the north side, but it was really, really burned. You know. And as I said before, we had come here to go to school from the country. And when the train started running, then we took a train and went on. We lived about 9 miles from Bristol. So we rode the train to 9 miles. We rode the train to Bristol. We got off there, so we went on out in the country. But do you know that in the last of August, or the 1st of September, we were right back here to try to live. And where my mother lived, where my mother got a place for us to stay, in those days, white people didn't do laundry like cleaning up and you know, washing laundry like that. Mm-hmm. And nearly every house had a little room built onto a garage called servant quarters. Now, on Main, that's where the people that I guess most of the good living people, white people that were on the north lived on North Main, and up on the hill where that nurse home is now, up there. But anyway, my mother found the quarters called servant quarters, and she rented the servant quarters, and we moved in there. And of course, in those days, you were walking everywhere you went, you know. You wasn't anything, but when there buses, and of course there were cabs around, but no one was financially able to use their cab, so everybody walked everywhere we went. We walked, and as I said, keeps repeating, I didn't see any people that were killed at that time, but I know that there were. And I did see all of the destruction. Now when I say now you can think how, you know that this from here to King part, well that was flat all the way. It goes far, you know, all over the Lance and all over the, what was that? And because we school opened in September, and that's another thing. I guess I just don't remember too much about what we did in school, but I know we went to school. I know that.
Which school was this?
I know we went to school.
Which school? What was the name of the school?
Booker T. Washington.
Booker Washington School. Yes, see, because it was still standing. It was still standing. We went to Booker Washington School. Of course, not at the very beginning we didn't, you know. And that was at the very beginning. I remember we went to the country, to the rural areas where we lived there. And that's where we were. So when we came back, we found homes, as I said, on the white side to what you call the servant quarters, you know, and we got work. And time went on and time went on, and we finally got back to what we were, and Greenwood came back to what it was. Might have been years, but it was back to what it was. Yeah. And that's about the biggest. It doesn't seem like I know anything very much to say, you know. Every time I think about it, I say, what did I know? Because I just ran all I did. And we did lose our home. We lost everything, of course. I believe that was the biggest thing, I believe.
Okay.
Other than the next thing I want to say is that I don't know how we built back so quick. I mean, quick might have been 8, 9 years. It was a long time already. But then we built all back really better than it is today, I think. I feel that it was built back better. But it took a time to do it. And segregation stayed on, you know. Segregation was on in those days, you know.
Jim Crow laws.
Okay.
I
Thank
think
you.
That
Let me help. Thank you, Mrs. Gibbs, for that excellent interview. We heard firsthand oral history account
I don't feel that I knew much to say.
But you did. You told a lot about the experience, the traumatic experience of what the riot did to you all. You gave accounts of good Samaritans, good white Samaritans who befriended you, and the rebuilding. That is extremely important. In fact, that time period between the rebuilding was 4 years. The Black Wall Street was destroyed in 1921. In 1925, the National Negro Business League held its meeting, its national meeting in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I have a picture on my wall, one of those yard-long pictures, showing Tulsa businessmen standing with businessmen from all over. And that was a tribute to the character of these people that she just talked about, how they were able to rebuild in such a short time. They rebuilt the Black Wall Street.
I'm not on talking to him.
And it was better. Some people think better
but
than
I'd like
before.
to say that I really understand what the people are going through in Europe. Although I went through only a few hours of it, and they've been going through many days. So I really understand not to have a home, not to have anywhere you can lie down and call a place to rest.
So you really relate to those people over there in Kosovo?
Yeah.
Those people in Europe, you understand how they feel?
That's right. Yeah. So I really understand what they're going through there. And it really hurts when I see them loaded up, leaving, just walking down on the highway, just walking, going, don't even know where you're going.
No,
I think about us, because we did that.
You know, I would...
But we were part that didn't last but a few hours, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to thank God for that, even though it's been years.
Miss Gibbs, you were a student and a teacher at Booker T. Washington, right?
Yeah, but I'm going to talk about it as a student.
Okay.
At Booker T. Washington.
Okay.
Okay. Now, we need to know Booker T. Washington was located, on the corner of Elgin Pines and Eastern Street. That's where Booker T. Washington was located. And Booker T. Washington was a 2-story building.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a building in the ground that you might call a basement building. There are two rooms downstairs for the girls, the sewing room and the cooking room. And then there was the one room for the boys, was a workshop. On the first floor, the principal's office. And there were 3 rooms on each side. See, we had, the history was the Seymour Williams, and we also had English, and math, which was algebra. Well, can't think of it. It said science, the rooms that owns it. And here there also were one room for 7th and 8th grade. You know, there were no junior high schools at that time. So Booker Washington carried 7th and 8th grade. Now on the 2nd floor, there was a Latin teacher, and then typewriting, such as that. You know, there were 3 rooms on one side, but one side upstairs there was vacant because we did not have an auditorium, and one side was used for auditorium, and we did not have a gymnasium, and that one side also was used for our basketball for the girls and basketball for the boys. And see what else we didn't have. We also didn't have a library. Mr. West used to bring his books so that we could have a library. Now, let's see, I'm going to go over again. We didn't have an auditorium. We didn't have a library. We did not have a cafeteria. But we did have a good basketball girl. And we had a good girls ball, a good boys ball game. And now I'm going to talk about the girls basketball team. I graduated in 1924. Now the girls basketball, Mr. Woods was the coach, and Mr. J.T. West, the science teacher, helped out. We had orange uniforms made out of linen and black serge bloomers. And those things had 2 yards in each one. We made our own uniforms in the sewing room. That's how we got to. Now, how did we do for playing games? When we played Ardmore, I believe Ardmore is the one that goes towards Claremore. When we played Ardmore, we couldn't get there in the afternoon. When school was out, we couldn't get there that day. But we took the train and went to Claremore. Claremore girl teachers, the Claremore girls and their parents would come